Hello, my name is Zach, and today I'm going to talk to you about the communication of emotion via the body in a small-scale traditional society. But before we get there, I want to tell you about a learning experience that, to this day, really sticks with me. I was in high school when Mr. Kennedy started to teach us about unconditioned responses in classical conditioning. To do this, he put up this really dense paragraph of text on the board, something like this, and he asked us all to read it silently. And then, he slowly and quietly walked to the back of the classroom, took the biggest textbook he could find, and slammed it on the ground as hard as he could. Because of this loud, unexpected sound, everyone was frightened, and there was a girl in the back of the classroom who, for now, we're just going to call her Nameless Faceless. And when Mr. Kennedy slammed the textbook, our nameless, faceless friend looked something like this. Mr. Kennedy immediately pointed to her and said that, right there, that's an unconditioned response. When we're frightened by something like a loud noise, we have this natural, unlearned inclination to respond by positioning and contorting our body in this very specific way. And on that day, it was clear to me that she was scared. And what a remarkable phenomenon. By moving her body in this particular way, she's not only protecting herself from whatever scared her, but she's also enabling me to recognize that she's scared. And by using her body rather than her face, I can see that she's scared, even when her face isn't visible, if she's turned around, or when she's far away. All this to say, we can use more than just our face to communicate fear. And as I've learned, this inclination isn't specific to Nameless Faceless. A lot of people move in very similar ways when frightened. So I'm going to show you images used in an outstanding paper by Leora Abramson. She gathered photographs of people in a haunted house right as they're being frightened. Pay attention to how these people move their bodies and arms. As you might have noticed, a lot of people move their bodies and arms similarly to how Nameless Faceless moved hers on that day. But it's not just fear. People also communicate sadness with the body. They communicate anger with the body. And when observers are shown these expressions, they can accurately identify the emotion. In fact, bodily expressions of emotion are recognized across a wide variety of cultures: the United States, the UK, Israel, China, Japan, the Netherlands, Cambodia. And this begs the question, if bodily expressions of emotion are recognized in all of these diverse places, might they be a universal feature of human communication? Now, I'm not going to be able to tackle the entirety of this question with my remaining 4 minutes, but I do want to present you some new data in which we use the maximally divergent population test of universality. This approach is guided by the understanding that if bodily expressions did not have universal origins, so for example, if they were culturally constructed, it would be remarkably difficult to reconcile how people that have basically no contact with North American culture could have still learned, or completely independently constructed, the exact same sets of facial or bodily movements used to convey emotion. Instead, if bodily expressions of emotion are recognized by a population that is so different and so untouched by North American culture, it's much more likely that these displays are an evolved and possibly universal feature of human behavior. So, I sought out collaborations with biological anthropologists in order to study the Mayanga people, a group of indigenous horticulturalists located in a remote part of the Baswas Reserve in northern Nicaragua. The first thing we wanted to do was assess their exposure to North American culture, so we showed them as many of the most famous North American faces we could find. And most participants recognized none of them. So suffice to say, these people really aren't exposed to North American culture, so if they can still recognize nonverbal displays used in the West, it's very unlikely to be a result of acculturation. So, after translating all of our materials into their local Mosquito language, we prompted participants, please select the image in which the person is angry, afraid, or sad. For each of these prompts, participants selected an emotion expression from a set of 4 different expressions, which were taken from past research. These included a neutral expression, a sad expression, an anger expression, and a fear expression. And, of course, we used multiple targets. So let's turn to results. I'm going to show you the proportion of accurate selections made in response to each prompt. Now, in all trials, participants did select between 4 nonverbal displays, so chance is at 25%, and for all 3 prompts, sadness, anger, and fear, Participants accurately selected each bodily expression at rates significantly greater than chance. So I was really excited about this, and I wanted to dig a little bit deeper. Let's distill this sample down a little bit. Instead of looking at the full sample, let's only look at a subgroup of these participants. Let's only look at the individuals who recognized none of the famous cultural icons, have never left Nicaragua, have never used the internet, have never seen any American movies or television, and critically were not fluent at speaking, reading, or writing Spanish, which is the national language of Nicaragua and widely spoken in the more industrialized parts of Nicaragua. And finally, we removed anyone who was able to recognize the current president of Nicaragua, who's also been on and off in power for the past 40 years, perhaps the most recognizable face in Nicaraguan politics. And this left us with 30 people. And even among these 30 participants, recognition rates were still significantly greater than chance, and very similar to the sample I previously presented. And let's get away from statistical significance for a second. Recognition for sadness and anger is pretty good. Actually, it's as high as it's historically been for similar studies using similar methods with similar samples testing for recognition of facial expressions of emotion. But with this said, it's also important to point out that recognition of fear is admittedly lower and somewhat less convincing. In conclusion, the ability to recognize bodily expressions of sadness, anger, and possibly fear is likely to be a universal feature of human communication. And I know this is my conclusion slide, but in reality, I hope it's actually just the beginning. Let's go replicate this research. Let's use new methods. Let's use dynamic stimuli. Let's use real-world expressions. Let's use free response in addition to forced choice. Let's do all of these things and really keep exploring how, why, and where the body is used to express and interpret emotion. And with that, a special thanks to Jess Tracy and all my collaborators who made this possible.